Today's learning target is I can solve division equations. Today we're going to be talking about the multiplicative inverse. And it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. So when we see the word multiplicative, notice here it's kind of like the word multiply. Okay? And inverse is kind of like reverse. Okay? The opposite in a way. So let me show you what the multiplicative inverse is. So I have a fraction here, 3/4. All right, so multiplicative inverse says if I multiply by the inverse, or reverse this, okay, so let's do that here. I'm going to multiply by the inverse. And again, the inverse is like reversing these numbers. Okay, so if I do that, watch what happens here. And you maybe already can tell what you get for an answer. But if I simplify these, just like I did yesterday, 3 goes into both of those, and 4 goes into both of those, I get 1/1, which I know is just 1. And I can do that here with any fraction. So here I have 1/2. Okay, the multiplicative inverse would say multiplying by the inverse, and the inverse of that would be 2/1. And now I can simplify. Those I can simplify them both by 2, and again, that answer becomes 1. I could even do it with a mixed number like this, but the first thing I'd have to do is turn it to an improper fraction. So I'd do 2 times 4 plus 1, change it into an improper fraction, gives me 9/2, and now multiply by the inverse would be 2/9, and when I do that, it would simplify out, and I would get 1s across, and that would give me 1. So the multiplicative inverse of 3/4 is 4/3, because that's what you multiply it by to get 1. The multiplicative inverse of 1/2 was 2/1. And the multiplicative inverse of this 4 1/2 we found right here was 2/9. So when we have an equation like we have right here, what I'm trying to figure out is what does this x right here have to be in order to get this side right here, 3/4 times some number, to be the same as this side, 12/20. Now to do that, I want to get this x by itself. So on this side right here, I can see I have 3/4 and I'm timesing it by x. Now here's where the multiplicative inverse, like we just talked about, comes into play. So I know if I multiply 3/4 by its multiplicative inverse, it's going to cancel these out, 1 and 1, and cancel those out, 1 and 1, and I'm going to get now on this side 1x. But remember, if I multiply in an equation one side by something, I have to do the same thing to the other side in order to keep it equal. So I multiplied this side by 4/3, so I'm going to have to multiply this side by 4/3 as well. And now I can solve this multiplication problem. My first step, I remember, is I simplify. Both of these I can divide by 3. So I'll cross both those out, put a 1 here and a 4 here. And I see that there's a 4 here and a 20 here. I know 4 goes into both of those. So that would be 1 there and 5 there. And now, when I solve that, I get 4/5 over here. So 1x, or 1x is really just the same as 1 times x. That would be the same as x, because 1 times anything is whatever that number is. And on this side, it's 4/5. So this mystery x would have to be 4/5 in order for these two sides to equal the same thing. Okay, so here I have another equation where I'm saying 7 is equal to some number over 4. Now remember, this divided by line, or this line, fraction line, means divided by. So it's saying some number divided by 4. Now in your head you might be able to solve this one, and maybe not, but either way you're going to show your work. Let me show you how we do that. So our goal, remember, is to figure out what this n is. So we want to get this n on this side all by itself. So we want to be able to get rid of or cancel out this divided by 4. Now let's think what we just did before. Now if I wanted to get this n by itself, I could times this side by 4/1. right? Because I know then that when I multiply, I can simplify these first. And look what happens when I do that. I divide them both by 4, and I now get 1 for each of those, right? So now this side is 1n over 1, which is, this is just saying it's n over 1, which is just the same as n. So now I've gotten this side, the n, by itself. But I know when I solve equations, if I do something to one side, in order to keep it equal, I have to do it to the other side. So here I times it by 4 over 1. And I know 4 over 1 is just the same as 4. So I want to times this side by 4. And I get 28 on this side. Now let's see if that makes sense. I wrote the original problem right here. And if I substituted 28 for n, so instead of n, I'll put 28 in here. 28 divided by 4, and that does equal 7. So that is the correct answer.